Hey guys, it's Vandy as by Carpet Vanguard deck profile. We got joy to like, comment, subscribe, sorry. This time we're covering another deck from D set 10 with it being Brandt Impauldio. So sorry about the background noise of this video because my dogs chose that we were going to hang it downstairs today against my will, and there's a lot of background noise going on because I live right next to a street. So if you hear a lot of cars and motorcycles going in the background, that's why. But let's get started and see what we got. Because honestly, Impauldio got a fair set of support over the last few sets, and a lot of people use Impauldio defensively. I do not do defensive play, I do all in on aggro, and this is honestly a fun deck to play on aggro. First up, we have our energy generator. It's our ride deck crest. You might direct text in your ride deck. Auto ride deck, when you ride, plus a card to your crest on for a second, energy charge 3. Continues by 10 energy, auto begin to ride phase, energy charge 3. Then act once per turn, energy about 7, draw a card. On pretty solid, you get free 3 energy every turn. Even with second, get extra 3 on top of that. And then once you blast 7 or more energy, you can draw a card. This deck does have cards that use up energy, so there will be times where you won't use that energy generator. But there are also times where you will use that energy generator because there's only one card in the deck that actually costs energy, and sometimes you use it, sometimes you won't. It just depends on the situation. So sometimes you'll draw, and sometimes you'll just use it on a different skill. And then we have our starter in Fault Stata, Grade 0 boost, 5k shield, 6k base, auto remove 5 second draw card, standard starter, and probably redraw if you go second. So you don't have to make this card your starter. The greater one doesn't technically require Fault Stater, but I mean, why wouldn't you use it? It fits the Impauldio line in terms of, aesthetic, and it also just looks really cool, but you could technically use any starter you want with this deck. Moving on to our Overtrigger, we have Star Dragon, DD of Infinitude, Eldo Breath, Grade 0 boost, 50k shield, 5k power, Overtrigger in your deck, reveal it as trigger, move that card, draw a card, choose one means get plus 1 million for the turn, and if you reveal it during your jet check, activate the addition effect, which you can double the power critical of your entire front row until the end of the turn, increase the double power critical when activated. So when you draw this damage check this, someone gets 1 million and you get a draw, but if you drove check this, whoever got the 1 million basically becomes 2 million base. Your other units get double the power, and pretty much everyone is a base critical of 2 now, and if you're on Impauldio Divine Skill turn, you're base critical of 4, assuming you didn't pull crits before this. So all around, Elder Breath is a very solid overtrigger, because essentially the turn you sack it, if you're aggroing at all, your opponent's probably dead, unless they have 2 to 3 PGs in their hand. So Elder Breath is a very solid over to have. It pretty much guarantees lethal the second you sack it. You can make it vulnerable for consistent multi-attacking with this deck, but I think Elder Breath is just the way to go, especially with a deck that already gains a lot of power to front row, and you want to multiply that to increase, lethal factor. Moving on, we have 3 copies of Endearing Vendor Metena. So Grade 0 boost, 50k shield, 0 power. So this is my first introduction of the Soul Front card. So auto and retire from Guard Sorkin may put this card into your soul. So she's solid. She was actually the first Soul Front I ever tested. Not in Impauldio. I tested it in Vasorug randomly, and it was actually really good in that Vasorug build. But the point is, this is the first deck I'm actually running it in a deck profile. She's pretty solid. She helps increase the soul, especially because this deck does have a lot of soul blasters, or it has 2, and I like to spam the living hell out of this goes. And honestly, there was a game where I just kept looping her to soul, and she was an incredibly useful Grade 0 for that reason alone. Only downside is though she has 0 power, so you can't call it a rear guard circle, but not a bad 15k shield, and again she's a front trigger, so if you just add your front row by 10k, it makes the deck already hit bigger. So 3 of Metania. Then we have a total of 8 crit, 4 being Star Aggression Dragon, Grade 0 boost, 15k shield, 5k base. Makes any crit you want, just make a Star Aggression Dragon because my favorite Brandt generic critical trigger. Then we have 4 Patrol Berdecker Cop, Grade 0 boost, 15k shield, 4k power, critical trigger, auto rear guard, and by the boosted shot with a soul, choose unique 50k for the turn. Okay, most decks I say you're not going to use that ability, but this deck does have a lot of abilities that can superior call, specifically one of our best rear guards in the form of Headway over here, and then our main Grade 3 obviously superior calls. So there are chances where you may end up just having to call Decker Cop, because there are a handful of times where I've only seen triggers in the top 5, and thankfully Decker Cop was one of them. So at least you have a way to get to soul, again, to spam out your soul blasters, such as Highway Router Dragon, Rebel, and Volt Dragon. So I chose to run 8 crit for overall just pressure, and 4 of them being Decker Cop, of course. And then 4 heal and Alterate Spear Dragon, Grade 0 boost, 50k shield, 5k power. You can technically make this anything you want. I chose to make Alterate Spear Giants because, like I do with most triggers, I have like 2 triggers combined into one, so if I run one, I gotta run the other. Star Aggression Dragon is that critical, and to be fair, it's just my favorite generic heal and Brandt, like how Star Aggression is my favorite generic heal and criticals, so that means I just run both of them in that regard. So 4 heal, 8 crit, 3 fronts. On to our Grade 1s. We start off, of course, with our most important card in the deck because the deck literally dies without it. System Code Exceed. Grade 1, set order. This card presents a System Code Exceed token and cannot be put into the main deck, so thankfully it doesn't take away deck space from you, unlike the Moongate from Vasorug, because apparently it was required that was a main deck card, because apparently this was too broken when Impauldio tested it out. Continuous Order Zone. You cannot ride Grade 3 or greater cards without Impauldio in their card names, and you may have auto mode gauges. Auto Order Zone. When a card is put into your damage zone during your opponent's turn, choose a card from your drop zone and put it face up as an auto mode gauge. Then if you have 3 or less auto mode gauges and a card other than a trigger was revealed for the damage check, choose one of your vanguards and it gets 5,000 power for the turn. If you have 4 more gauges though, regardless if you put a trigger or not, you get 5,000 power. Honestly, pretty solid, because every time you take damage in the early game, you get just a free gauge, and there are a lot of times where you can just choose to guard during your opponent's early turns, especially if they're going to get to Grade 3 first, and you just ham on 1 turn of taking damage, and then you just constantly get gauges, so that way when you hit Grade 3 turn, you're hitting your opponent back with pretty good numbers. All around pretty solid that it fills with the gauge zone very quickly, and it also gives your Vanguard 5k every single time, as long as you didn't pull a trigger. So you pull a trigger in the early game, well, it already shuts down most of your opponent's attacks, and if you pull it in the late game, well, plus the additional 5k after you already got 4 more gauges. Pretty solid card to have. I love System Code Exceed a lot, and thankfully you don't have to have it in the main deck, so one of as our token card. As for our Grade 1, starting off with our unit cards, 4 Detonation Monster Bubble Mine, Grade 1 boost 5k shield, AK base, auto rear guard, the about that it boosted anything, if your order's on a set order, unit. Thankfully, this will always be in your order zone. Yeet it to soul, countercharge 1. Pretty solid. It gets you soul, which again, you can spam out via headway router over here, Nebula Invoke. But not to mention the fact as well, it can get you a CB back, which is really good because even though we only have 3 cards that cost CB, these are cards you want to use every turn if physically possible. So for Bold Mind, it gets you 2 different very important resources back into the deck, and obviously you can't go without it. And thankfully, this deck has 2 ways to Superior Call it out from the top 5, so you're very often going to hit Bubble Mind, whether you just hard draw or whether you Superior Calling it from top 5 searches. Moving on, we have 4 copies of Gather 2/2. So Great Own Boost 5k Shield, aka base. It's a continuous rear guard during turn if you have 4 more Automo gauges, 10,000 power. So, you know, it's just a generic 18k beater. The thing is with this, though, is this is a really good grade 1. If in the off chance your opponent aggroed you hard before either of you even got to grade 2, and you planned ahead for this, you can make Gather 2/2 a 18k body on your opponent's grade 1/grade 2 Vanguard. Realistically, that's never going to happen, but if you plan for it specifically and it does end up coming up, well, there you go. But specifically, you can pull this off on your first grade 3 turn while your opponent's at grade 2, because 9 times out of 10, you have 4 more Automo gauges in your order zone anyways during that first grade 3 turn, regardless of who went first and who went second, meaning this thing can be an 18k body plus Impauldios plus 10k to front row, bullying down your opponent's grade 2 Vanguard. All around, it's a very good card for just generic beat stick and numbers. If you want to take this out for a different card overall, you can. Again, most people tend to run Impauldio more defensively, but because I like to run it more aggressively, I'm obviously going to run a giant beat stick card in. There we go. Moving on, we have 4 copies of Headway Router Dragon, Great Own Boost 5k Shield, aka base, auto place on rear guard circle at any point in the game. If you have an auto mode gauge, just a singular gauge, Energy Blast 3, check the top 5, choose to 1 card with a different card name from this unit, and a grade less than equal to your Vanguard, call to rear guard circle, shuffle your deck. So as long as you don't call a copy of itself, you're getting a rear guard. And because this deck only has 1 like actual grade 3 rear guard, odds are once you hit grade 2 where you actually start getting auto mode gauges, you're pretty much going to get a Superior Call out of that. And then auto rear guard, when it boosts anything, if you have 5 or more auto mode gauges, Soul Boss 1, give it 5,000 power for the turn. I hate that it's locked behind 5 or more gauges because again, I specified earlier that you get 4 gauges by your first grade 3 turn, but typically you're always 1 short if you want to use the grade 2 of the ride line skill. So take that as you will, but Headway is still a very solid grade 1 to have because again, you get you rear guards for only 3 energy, a resource you get every single turn on the dot, exactly 3 mind you, and it's a 13k booster once you get 5 or more gauge, which is relatively easy to hit in the deck if you choose not to use the grade 2 skill. So 4 of Headway Router. Then of course we have our PG and 4 strong arm conversion Stroga arms, grade 1 boost, 0 social base. I want the day to come by where I can build another deck that doesn't run PGs just for the sake of it actually being smart enough to run PGs. It's happened once and I want it to happen again because it's just really fun when that happens. Anyways, continue to set it up 4 stencils and deck up in guard circle, choose one reads that cannot be hits and battle for your more cards and choose a card from hand and discard it. Set a PG, nothing to specify. It basically means it doesn't want a card in hand, place it in guard circle. You don't have to start with great. Because that means to be super aggressive in the early game. Pretty much spam the ever living hell out of everything you see once you can start swinging at your opponent's Vanguard. And then when your opponent does eventually counterattack you, when you have little hand cards and they finally got past the system code exceed and trigger spam, throw down Stroga arms, give them the middle finger, you're good to go. All around, very solid PG to have in the deck. If it's Impauldio Demon being a robot battler, you can make this card Violate Dragon or Planet Wall Dragon because they have that same skill as Stroga arms. But choose to make a Stroga arms come close to the time of Impauldio's release. Last card on our deck, one of in the red deck, none in the main deck of Eno Proget, grade 1 boost 5k Shield, AK base. So while I did say System Code Exceed is the most important card in the deck, this is arguably also the most important card because it's the card that gets you System Code Exceed. Auto and placed by writing from a grade 0 unit, reveal a grade 3 card Impauldio in the card from the right deck, plus System Code Exceed into your order zone. Cool, it gets your token order for free, literally just by being placed, meaning you can proc it off the second you get the chance. The best part is too, just requires any grade 3 with Impauldio, so if they ever upgrade Impauldio, you know, they ever give it like a Raksha treatment or a Levy Draws treatment where you can put it in the ride deck instead of having just to put it in the main deck for a ride, well, there you go, it could proc it off with that. I don't know why, but now I'm starting to actually see images of an Impauldio evolution. Honest to God, if Bushy did it, I would actually be intrigued because Impauldio is one of the only Destined ones I actually liked upon debut, so you know what, take that as you will. On to our grade 2s. 3 of Radial RNA, grade 2 and 5k Shield, 10k base. Continues rear guard circle during turn. If you have 4 more auto gauges, he gets boost and 5,000 power. Again, typically first grade 3 turn, that's pretty much always going to go off, so 15k base and boost. And then auto rear guard by the attack or boosted. If your card was put into your auto gauge during this turn by any means, aka Impauldio over here, kill it, choose the most rear guard, murder in the process. So it's weird that it just requires you to place the gauge that turn, but I mean on the price that doesn't cost anything else. So it just gets to murk an opponent's rear guard again, regardless of what grade the opponent's Vanguard's at. I mean, you can just kind of slowly control your opponent's board while also attacking them aggressively with a full board of grade 2s and above. All around, very solid grade 2 to have in the deck. I don't think you need more than 3 of it though, because we already have better attackers in the deck. And again, I prefer the more aggressive build, so I wouldn't really want to have a controlling card in it. But if you do want to run it for the controlling build, it's a solid. I think you would keep it as 3 of anyways, because they're better like generic cards to have, you know, defensive power to them. Moving on, we have 4 copies of a card that you run 4 of anyways, and that's Nebula Invoke Dragon, grade 2 and 5k Shield, 10k base. Whether you're running the offense or defense, it's just a great card because auto rear guard when it attacks anything, Vanguard or rear guard at any point in the game. Soul Boss 1 gets 5,000 power for the battle, so 15k swing. But if you have 5 or more gauges, again, annoyed that it's 5 or more, but it makes sense, it gets 15k instead. 25k swing once you have 5 or more gauges. Pretty solid. Again, into a Vanguard or rear guard, so you can just bully down your opponent's board more that way. And then continuous guard circle, if you have 4 more gauges, it gets 15k shield. This is one of the few cards whose shield value gets plus 15. Most of them give plus 5, a small handful give plus 10. This is one of the few cards that gives plus 15. This card is a 20k shield, and again, because 4 more do you typically hit on your first grade 3 turn, from first grade 3 turn onwards, this is a 20k shield you have 4 copies of. And the defensive version of the deck finds ways to superior call Nebula Invoke from drop zone back to guard circle, which means you have more than just 4 copies of a 20k shield. This card's an incredible grade 2. It's an amazing beat stick after a very specific point in the game. It's an incredible shield value basically once you hit grade 3. Who wouldn't want to run this as a 4 in their deck? It's just great regardless if you're playing aggressive or defensive. But a really good card for the aggressive build is Viador Heyday, who is pretty much mini Impauldio, which I maybe rather I like him so much. Great chance of 5k shield, 10k base. Continuous if your order zone has a system code exceed, it gets all the following. Auto when placed on rearguard circle by any means from anywhere, so hard place from hand, call from drop zone, or call from Impaudio's deck top effect. If you have 2 or more auto mode gauges, Soul Blast 2 draw card. So pretty solid because again, you can technically pull it off on your grade 2 turn if your opponent hits you twice, so solid that you can pull it off early as possible. And then auto rearguard is about to attack a grade 3 or grade unit while not being boosted if it is the first battle that turn, specifically CB1 stand it. They had to be as specific as possible with this card because otherwise Impauldio would be broken. Because I had one turn where I had this card on my divine skill turn, so it was turn 4, and my things were giving plus 15, and I already had a persona active, so plus 25. So on its own, this was a 35k swinger, and I did have a second Viador Heyday, but I couldn't use its skill obviously because that's to be the first battle and I can't be boosted. But if it could have, I think I would have won because I would have had 5 attacks and all of them were at the bare minimum 35k. Honestly, Viador Heyday is a great grade 2. It gets you hand cards while also filling up your drop zone for your system code exceed. Even it does take away soul from, you know, Headway Router and Nebula Invoke, but again, that's why we run cards like Bow Mine, Patrol Worker, Depper Cop, and of course High-NA over here. But more importantly, it also can get you multi-attack in a deck that didn't have multi-attack before. Since Impauldio was so focused on giving power to everyone and being a beat stick deck, this deck benefits from having a multi-attack even if it's really restricted. Very solid grade 2 to have in the deck. Good for just overall gaining resources, both for the drop zone to go into system code exceed but hand cards, but also good for attacking as well, so 4 of. Then we have 1 copy of our last grade 2 in the deck, one of in the right deck, none in the main deck, of Drast Impauldio, who gives me Beast Deity vibes when I look at him sometimes. This is like one of the grade 1s whose name eludes me right now. And it was grade 2 and it's a 5k shield, 10k base, auto and Rotopon by a grade 3 card Impauldio in the card name. Again, any Impauldio, so they ever actually upgraded, there you go. But the top card of your deck face up as an auto mode gauge and choose a card from your auto mode gauge and you may put it to hand. It gets you a free auto mode gauge and you don't have to put a card to your hand. You have to choose one, but you don't have to put something into hand. But typically you end up using the cards that you use to guard to specifically put them back into your gauge. And because it specifically triggers, half the time you just put them back into your hand and that way you have guard power. One time I just a PG, cycled that PG right back into the order zone and then proceeded to grab that PG from Drast. But typically you can choose to get a persona right back or an attacker back like Viador Heyday or the next card we're going to go over. But again, sometimes you can just choose to keep the card in there in case it's going to be the difference between you hitting Impaudio's number threshold or not. So one of Drast in the right deck. Not a bad grade 2 to have, and you know, its skill is versatile enough where you can use it one way or the other. As for our grade 3s, we start off with 4 copies of Skyleap Conversion Vindastar. Grade 3 to 9% 13k base, continuous rearguard circle during turn if you have 2 or more auto mode gauges, it gets 5,000 power. And if you have 8 or more auto mode gauges, its drives cannot be decreased by card effects from either your or your opponent's side, which means he'll constantly have twin drive, and that's important for a second ability, but he's an 18k once you have 2 or more gauges, and again, you're going to pull it off guaranteed once you hit grade 3. And then auto rearguard when it attacks anything, if you have 4 more auto mode gauges and you no drive checks will perform but battle your rearguard attack this turn, counterboss when to end a battle can perform drive checks and it loses 1 drive, and at the end of the battle bind it. I wish it sent itself to gauge, especially because this card's a triple rare, meaning this could gauge charge you a hell of a lot faster and work with cards things like radio RNA. But hey, it's not a bad grade 3 at all. Again, it's an 18k pretty much guaranteed half the time, and once you do hit the 8 or more gauges, his drives can't be reduced, and that basically means you have a total of 6 drive checks during your divine skill turn, which puts on a hell of a lot of pressure to your opponent. And you can do drive checks regardless of what grade your opponent's vanguard's at, so it's still a pretty solid grade 2 to have in the deck regardless, so it's a good 4 of. My only hate with it again is that it binds itself and doesn't go to gauge. And our last card in the deck is obviously our main grade 3, the conqueror of all, the exceeding the mightiest, the one who will eventually conquer the unparalleled, destined one of exceedance, Impauldio. I almost said Varga Dragras there because I was too focused on the unparalleled bit. Grade 3, twin drive, persona at 13k base. I remember the time me and my friend played his defensive build against my rock ship build. The first game I lost because I played too defensively. The second game I won because I got to the same point where I played too defensively and I chose to play aggressively in that case and I won off of it. And my hand was really bad, mind you. So yeah, anyways, act Vanguard once per turn, CV1, choose a card from your drop zone, put it face up as an auto mode gauge, and then check the top 5, choose 1 grade 3 this card from among them, card to rearguard circle shuffle. This unit gets auto Vanguard. All your farm units get 5,000 power for every 2 auto mode gauges till end of turn. It gives itself a continuous Vanguard ability that gives your numbers to front row. Not to mention the fact you also get to superior call something from the top 5 and charge a gauge as well, all for 1 simple CB. Like, that's how you do a support skill. It gets you rear guards, it gets you numbers, and it supports the deck deck's main gimmick. You can learn from this, Granfia. Yes, I'm still pissed off about this. And then the Divine Skill, the cherry on top, and what makes me want to play the aggressive version of this deck. Active Vanguard. If your opponent's Vanguards are grade 3 or greater and you have 4 more auto mode gauges, CB1, ditch 1, it gets +1 critical and +2 drives for the turn. Again, most people tend to play the defensive version of Impauldio, so that's mainly more just an outright pressure move. For me, I like to play the aggressive version. What that means is, because like I keep saying during this video, you tend to have 4 more gauges on first grade 3 turn. That means if I hit first grade 3 turn and my opponent went first, I straight up Divine Skill on first grade 3 turn, whether I have lethal or not, because odds are, knowing me, I'm in the situation where if I don't do this, I'm gonna die next turn, so this is actually my best defensive play possible. And then I aggro like hell with Vindastar and Veador, and pray to God my opponent either dies from this or they walk away incredibly crippled. Either way, it's a very solid grade 3 to have, because again, it gets you rear guards and pretty much does the deck's entire gimmick on its own while also giving power, but it also just has a really good Divine Skill. Like, yes, it's simple, it's just a crit and 2 drives, but it already gets power to stuff. We now have a multi-attacker and we have other ways to do drive checks. So now it has crit pressure in a deck that has the access to one of the strongest over triggers in the game and pretty much guarantees lethal from 2 damage if you sack it. And it gets more drives to increase the chance of you seeing it, all for simple CB and discard, which just causes the deck to have a simple CB problem, but again, that's a once per game ability and you can eat that out with both mine. So not a bad grade 3 to have in the deck. It's a nice to have in the main deck, one of in the ride deck for everything it does, and honestly, Bushy did a really good job designing it. It's very simplistic, but it's very strong, deserving of the name Exceedance. And without further ado, that's it for this one. I hope all of you guys enjoyed. This deck is what I thought Granfia should be. Like, this is what I think Granfia should aspire to be. They use their gauge system. Oh, look at that. They both use gauge system. They use their gauge system properly. Their main grade 3 has a way to increase their gauge. Their main grade 3 has a way to empower their front row units. Their main grade 3 has a way to call rear guards. And the main grade 3 has a form of pressure to bully down your opponent. All around, it's a very fun deck to play, so I definitely recommend you try it out if you want a deck that balances both well with attacking power and defensive power and overall consistency, and can play to either playstyle depending on which way you want. So I'll see you all then. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, don't forget to Twitch, and don't forget to send up your vanguards.